Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I'll tell you what, in 600 some odd episodes, we somehow have never talked about the big opportunity of doing business on Amazon. We all know Amazon as consumers. We all know Amazon is a huge e-commerce platform, but we've never talked about it here today. So we've got an incredible guest who not only has grown his own Amazon brands, but now he helps others do exactly that. And I personally am very curious about this. So I'm going to tell you about today's guest. His name is Jon Stojan. After serving in the military for 14 years as an Air Force officer, Jon transitioned his strategic planning and execution skills to e-commerce and built his own six-figure brand on Amazon. Today, he helps other brands win on Amazon as the founder of his premier agency, First North Marketing, which is a full-service Amazon marketing agency that helps brands engineer profitable growth through tailored strategies. Jon is awesome. I love his energy. I love how much he shows up out of service for others. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Jon Stojan. All right, Jon, I am so excited to officially welcome you to the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Heck yeah, I gave just a short bio. Thank you for your service, by the way. It means so much. I think it speaks so much about your attitude, not only towards business, but towards life. I'd love for you to fill in those gaps for listeners. How the heck did you get here? Talk to us about that transition you made from Air Force to e-commerce to now helping others. We want to hear that backstory.
So I originally started actually as a way to pay for college, where that was the original idea, was that I went through the ROTC program. So that's basically where they train officers while you go to college at the same time. The first time I put on my uniform happened to be a date that we all remember as 9/11, as a cadet in ROTC. So obviously from there, the mission changed in the sense of it really made me reflect on, yes, it's great to, have the military pay for college, but then also to serve, especially in such a kind of tumultuous time. So graduated and went on to serve 4 years on active duty. And then I've actually still active in the reserve for about 13 years now. In addition to that, kind of the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, and learned a lot out of that experience. Where I was working with primarily air crew, but also kind of senior leaders and helping them put together data as they were thinking about strategies and how to execute the mission and all those types of things that we do in the military. And so I took that experience after about 14 years, and I've always been interested in being an entrepreneur, even from a little kid. I started out, buying and selling basically baseball cards when I was a little kid. And in fact, I still have a Terry Bradshaw rookie card from like the 1970s that I picked up in like 1993. So always been kind of an entrepreneur at heart. So started down that path kind of nights and weekends. And really my path was Amazon, because that's what provided a lot of the flexibility as far as I could work on it nights and weekends. And because Amazon was basically the platform for taking care of a lot of my logistics and shipping to customers, while at the same time, the platform where the demand was at. I built my six-figure business on Amazon to start out with, because I was able to fit it into nights and weekends.
Yeah, Jon, I love that overview for so many reasons, especially because I had a big smile on my face when you were talking about having, special sports cards when you were young and entrepreneurial spirit, even from a young age. I feel like all of us are guilty of that. When we look back, the signs were always there for each and every one of us to turn into entrepreneurs. So it's cool that you followed that calling. And especially, it's no surprise to me that with the military background, you do think about things operationally, strategically. And so one other thing I want to call out before we go deeper into this conversation is, listeners, do you hear what Jon just said when he started talking about Amazon as a platform? He said the demand was there. That's the beauty of operating on a platform that already has buyers. The demand is already there. So Jon, you tapped into that. Take us back to those early days. When we talk about selling things on Amazon, what the heck were you selling? Where was your head at? What were your pricing strategies? What were some of those earliest lessons? Because I know the beginning, it had to have been ugly.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately at that point, I had actually developed a product And I launched a Kickstarter and raised about $10,000 from a Kickstarter. And a lot of the success was, quite frankly, being engaged. So in that, at that time, this was probably so it was 2017 when I did that. And it was a product in the keto space. And so I've tapped into the keto community, reached out to people, and really just, made friends in the sense of let them know what I was working on, but also looked at different ways that I could add value. And that really helped me do a Kickstarter that raised $10,000 and kind of did my first initial product run. And then from there in 2018, I launched on Amazon. And I think one of the keys to success there was, one, I was in a category that was fairly new. Amazon was a little bit of the wild, wild west in the sense of, it was easy to at least get your visibility for your product. Of course, you had to have a good product in order to make sales. And we'd done a lot of work up front. So we had a good product. And so, I think within the first month, we were doing, over $5,000 in sales on Amazon because we had a good product, because of a lot of legwork we did in advance. And, that just allowed us to grow from there.
Yeah, that's epic. And I think a lot of listeners are going to be tuning into this and saying, gosh, Jon, wait, you listed your product on Amazon and it started getting sales. Obviously, you had the Kickstarter to give you that initial boost, but most people don't realize what it's like to just get a notification on your phone saying, boom, you've gotten a sale. Boom, you've gotten a sale. It's the best feeling in the world. And $5,000 a month starting out in your first month, that is not chump change. That is a huge start for any entrepreneur in their business. Talk to us about the logistics behind an Amazon business. You already talked about how Amazon handles a lot of that, but what does it actually look like? Who's touching products? What are shipping costs? How much customer service are you dealing with? What's the back end of this type of business look like?
Yeah, great question. And I should say that, it's changed a lot in the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic. It's gotten a lot more competitive, but there's still a ton of opportunity there. So what it looks like behind the scenes is, whether you manufacture the product yourself or you have it, a manufacturer make it for you, generally what happens is you're going to want to have Amazon fulfill that product. And there's two reasons for that. One is because it's just going to be more cost effective. So when we looked at, actually somebody picking up our product and, shipping it to the customer, it was cheaper to have Amazon pick, pack, and ship it to the customer than it was even if I had, boxed up at my house and ran it down to the post office. So from that perspective, not only was it cheaper, but also more scalable because obviously, when you're first starting out with the business, you don't have a huge team. It's, usually just that one person. And so that was one of the great advantages and still is of Amazon from the logistics standpoint is I can ship in, 1,000 units or whatever I need. And then Amazon fulfills the rest of it through their processes. So customers are happy because through the Fulfilled by Amazon program, they're getting those products, in that 1 to 2 day shipping that they really want. And it's more cost effective than even if I was to ship it from my house and drive down to the post office and drop those boxes off at the post office.
Yeah, makes sense because obviously speaking about logistics, which let's face it, the shipping industry is a logistics industry. Amazon at their scale has figured this stuff out. So I agree with you. I mean, there are great solutions there as far as ShipStation, Stamps.com. We are able to do all this. Amazon can just do it faster, cheaper, better than all of us. So I love hearing your logistics take on that. And I want to call this out for listeners is they're probably thinking, well, you talk about mailing Amazon inventory. I would imagine that's where having a Kickstarter, having that beginning capital comes in because we're not talking print on demand. You are talking about having a real product, paying for it, whether you said that the two options, you make it yourself, you have it imported from China, for example, and then mailing it to Amazon, you need to front that cost. What sort of costs, because you're talking about mailing it to a warehouse, what sort of costs are involved in the Amazon business?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on, the nice thing is that it depends on how much inventory you're sending in and, making sure that you have a couple months of inventory to send. But I would also say from the seller's perspective, Amazon does a really good job of basically they pre-negotiate with trucking companies and then UPS. So for example, for me, for our product, it just made sense to where we actually used UPS. But the rate that we got for Amazon for, say, sending in a box that weighed around 50 pounds, I think it costs, around $12. So it was incredibly cheap for us to ship that product into Amazon, into their warehouses. And then from there, they pay to distribute it throughout the country where they think the product needs to be based on sales history in order to reach customers within a day or two. So that's part of the advantage too, is that they have such a good logistics network. And then, what I think also I want to highlight in this is that, yes, the logistics from a business perspective are important, and it is a cost-effective way in order to handle that perspective. But then also, I would say the bigger impact is even from a marketing perspective, as far as, what customers' expectations are, where they want their product in a day or two. And Amazon is phenomenal at doing that. And that's really tough to duplicate outside of Amazon as a standalone business if you're selling products anywhere else using some of those other solutions. And your conversion rate or how much you sell can be double because you're able to put that product in a customer's hands in 1 to 2 days.
Wow, holy cow, Jon. I didn't even realize that Amazon helps you on the front end of getting things to them. That's something that's brand new to me, and that's incredible and makes sense because they want it to be as easy as possible for their sellers as well, because that fuels the success of it. And I totally hear you on shipping times and those logistics being a customer benefit, because Amazon has spoiled us all. If I can't have it the same day or the next day, I just quite frankly don't want it. So I love that. Obviously, we're talking about your business, Jon, and your online brands, but also now with First North Marketing, you help other people do this. And I love that fact because you are passing it on, but also you've been in the game. You're not just someone who teaches it, you also have done it yourself, which I think that's like the one thing. I always want to highlight entrepreneurs who operate that way because you are a living, breathing example of it. But it also means that you've seen the changes along the way. And you talk about how it once was the wild, wild west. It's different now. It's more competitive now. I'm sure you hear this, like I've heard it since I started a podcast. People say, oh, podcasts are dead. Blogging is dead. Email marketing is dead. People have said Amazon is dead. What are your thoughts on the state of Amazon today? Is the opportunity still there? How is it a little different? Walk us through those changes.
Yeah, I think that it's important to know that there still is a ton of opportunity there. Two, that the opportunity has changed. So, 3 or 4 years ago, you were able to there was a lot more buyers than there were sellers. So if you put up a halfway decent product and had, a decent listing with good images and you were targeting the right keywords, you could do fairly well on Amazon. Today, you really need to be focused on building a brand and having a strong strategy when you launch that product in order to really get that product to page 1 for the right keywords. And then in order to maintain that sales velocity on Amazon. So it really does take some more planning up front and also some more capital than maybe what it took a couple of years ago. But for the entrepreneurs who are long-term thinkers that are really building brands, there's still a ton of opportunity there because over 50% of the searches with buyer intent when people are looking for a product happen today on Amazon. So there's a lot of customers there looking for solutions. It's a matter of making sure that you are the right solution positioned correctly at the right time for those customers when they're looking for something to solve their problem.
Yeah, Jon, I love that overview from you because it seems to stand out to me anytime I talk to someone who's doing business on Amazon is that they always do talk about that brand development, which I think we as customers, we don't appreciate how much work, how much strategy, how much intention goes into that. And I want to push you a little bit on that because as a consumer, part of my thought process is I'm just like, do I have loyalty to any brand on Amazon? Am I brand agnostic? Because my personal behavior on Amazon is when I go to the website or the app mostly, I search for what I need. I look at whatever has the most reviews with a good score. I read through the description and I buy it. Where does the brand play into all of this stuff to succeed there?
Yeah, great question. So first I would go back to, you talked about how many reviews a product has. So that's the first thing is, making sure that you're building reviews are basically, the social proof on Amazon. So building up a good review count for your products that you have on there is super important. And having that as much as you can across your brand. But then also within Amazon, and again, this is more on, it's not so much, it's very subtle from the buyer's perspective, but on the seller's end, there's a lot of things that you can do as far as making sure that if you have complementary products, that you're highlighting those complementary products on your listings, and then also on some of the different ad types and different content types that Amazon offers to customers when they see your products. So those are the couple of different ways that you can build brands, that you can really focus on that brand piece right now. And Amazon is coming out with a lot more ways in order to do that. And really what we're seeing right now is the people that are winning on Amazon are building up that brand. So if you have a product that somebody really enjoys and there's something that's complementary to that, then they're looking at that product, or they're looking for that solution from that same brand. So just to give you an example, somebody that we've coordinated with, and the brand that we know fairly well, they sell in the pool category, where it's something that they sell a pool product for multiple different uses. And what they see a lot is that, yes, they have a primary product that's, what we call in the industry the hero product that gets most of the traffic and most of the love, but that's kind of also helps lift the sales for a lot of some of their other complementary products along the way, where they see additional sales for people that maybe started out where they just needed a simple pool net, and now they're looking at a pool skimmer from the same brand because they know the product that they just bought was so much more better than the other competitors that they were looking at on Amazon, that they want to buy that product that's really going to solve their problem, and is going to be super high quality.
Yeah, I love that example, because I guess when I asked the question, I wasn't necessarily thinking in terms of product verticals. And now that you've given that pool example, yeah, anyone who's buying one thing for a pool is going to have other needs for a pool. So if you are their go-to pool vendor on Amazon, it makes sense. The real life example for me is tech. I'm always buying USB hubs, wires for my cameras, for my microphones, all these different things. And you're right. When you find a good brand, one that you trust, their products are good, and maybe if you had an issue and you needed to return it and their customer service was incredibly responsive, then yeah, I agree. That's where that brand loyalty comes from. I feel like we've talked about so many different things as far as now we both have brought up reviews. We've talked about the brand. You've mentioned the listings a few times. Where does the success really lie on Amazon? What is that magical combination or formula that you've seen? And I know a lot of it, I want to stress for listeners, is experimentation. Nobody knows all the answers, or else everybody would be an Amazon billionaire. But Jon, from your perspective, what are those heavy hitting things that if you get these things right, then you start to have momentum and success on there?
Yeah, I would say, so the first thing that you need to start out with is having an okay or even a good product that looks similar to your competitors on Amazon isn't going to get you where you need to go anymore. So you really have to have a product that has that's a high quality product and has benefits and features that your customers are looking for. So it starts out with a really strong product. As a marketing guy, there's a lot of different things that we can do from the marketing perspective. But at the end of the day, we have to start with a strong product with benefits that customers care about. So that's the first thing to think about is that, do the research on the front end to identify products that your customers are really going to care about. And then the next piece of it is really, once you've dialed that in, then make sure that you're using, Amazon SEO, and then images to really highlight, what we like to call kind of those lead benefits. There's, a lot of different features and benefits that you probably can talk about with any product, but what are the ones that your customers really care about in order to solve their pain points? So you want to find those and make sure that you're on page one for the keywords that your customers are going to put in order to find that product to really solve their pain point, and that highlight that benefit that your product really offers in order to give them the result that they want. So those are some of the basics. Then of course, now on Amazon, we're really moving more towards having high quality images with people interacting with the product. And then really in the last year, it's also moved to videos becoming more and more important across the platform, of making sure that you're using video to demonstrate how the product is used, the benefits around the product, and how it ties into your overall brand story as well. And that's kind of back to, that brand point that we talked about of how does this product fit into your brand and what does your brand stand for?
Yeah, Jon, I suspect that so many of your answers are going to close those circles, coming back to the brand, coming back to your listing, but most importantly, coming back to having a good product. It's a message I hear from you so many times in our session already today, which I feel like that's probably the toughest part of the equation to get right. I would imagine, as someone who's not in the game. And part of me, my natural question there would be, what is it? Like, how, I mean, you personally are successful with this. You talk about getting into the keto space before keto was really hot. I feel like keto is such a hot space right now. There's a lot of awesome products there. You have been in it for years now, which is awesome. What is that delicate balance of getting onto Amazon, selling something that's already selling versus selling something that you know it's coming, you know it's going to be tomorrow's trend? How do we stay ahead of that stuff, or do we even worry about staying ahead of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I got into, just to kind of share my experience with it. So I got into I had a keto brand and a keto product because I personally got very interested in that space and was very involved in it. I would say whatever space, especially for beginning entrepreneurs, you really need to be involved in that space. So pick something that interests you and that you're willing to engage with that community, because that's really going to help you get out of the gate and really understand what that community wants and needs and being able to speak their language. So that's the first thing that I would say is really understanding whatever community that you want to sell into. And then the other thing is, I would say, is really focus on testing and not falling too much in love with one product, because the product that you think is absolutely going to blow the doors off and going to be, a mega success, probably 80% of the time, it's not going to work out the way that you want it to. And then other products that you launch that, you think might be, okay, or incrementally adding to what you're already doing. There's a number of times where I've had products surprise me where I thought, hey, this is going to be a great base hit, but probably isn't going to really move the needle for us. And, customers just really fell in love with the product. It had really good product market fit. And we ended up selling, 10 times or 100 times more than we expected.
Yeah, Jon, it's that sort of transparency that listeners so appreciate here on our show, because that's the reality of business. And I just want to echo it because I think it's such an important message from you, is that whatever you think is going to happen out of the gates, it's probably not going to work the first time, maybe not even the 5th or the 10th time. But that's why I love the baseball analogy from you. Keep swinging the bat. You never know how many singles, doubles, triples until you get that home run that you're looking for. But it all involves in continuing to take swings. So I love that advice from you right there, Jon. I want to talk about, because I feel like the more we talk about these things that are super important, in my head, I keep coming back to reviews. And full transparency, the only product I sell on Amazon is my book. Listeners know it well. It's called Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur. It's the book that started this entire podcast. And Jon, this is the one area that I've been terrible. We have had entrepreneurs all over the world read the book, buy the book on Amazon, thousands of sales on Amazon, and I maybe have like 20 reviews, I think. I've just not made an effort. I feel like that's something that's so hard to get. What is the secret? Because people love leaving reviews when they're wildly unhappy, but how is it that you're going about, for your own brands, for the brands that you're consulting with, how the heck do you get reviews on Amazon from loyal, happy fans?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you'll hear me repeat myself again. So the first thing is that you want to make sure that you have a really strong product. Because like you said, if somebody doesn't like your product, they're 10 times more likely to leave a 1-star review. And those 1-star reviews are really challenging to overcome. So you need, if you think about it like an equation, you need about 10 to 15 5-star reviews to overcome a 1-star review. So that's why it's so important that your product is really strong. The next thing is that it comes down to, in a certain aspect, to numbers. So that's where, especially early in a product's history, you really need to have sales velocity. So you want to look at, in that first kind of launch phase, rather than optimizing for profits right away, how do I optimize for sales velocity? And that may mean listing your product at a lower price than what's maybe optimal for where you eventually want to be. And it also may mean that you're going to be, what we do is working with clients, especially, is we're very heavy on Amazon's pay-per-click platform initially for a product to really drive that sales velocity in order to get those reviews moving. And then from there, it's kind of a snowball effect. So, Amazon is very much of a flywheel. The more reviews and more sales that you have means you're going to have higher ranks, which means you're going to have more sales and reviews, and those types of things. So you really want to have a good plan in order to kickstart that sales velocity process. So that way you have the flywheel moving for you on Amazon. And then the other thing that we use for a lot of our clients is we also use inserts into our products so that in a terms of service way that complies with Amazon, that encourages people to leave a review without incentivizing them, and also gives us an opportunity to interact with that customer off of Amazon. So that might be something like collecting email or something like that. So that way we can continue that conversation. And again, you want to make sure that you do this in an Amazon terms of service way, but there's definitely a way to do that to where you can ask for reviews. And then making sure that you're taking advantage of the simple things that Amazon does give you, which is you can request up to one time you can send a request to customers after they've purchased the product for a review. You want to think about what's the review cycle for your product. So if you have, for example, something like a book, you probably want to ask for that review in that first, 3 to 5 days, or maybe up to a week, where they've gotten a chance to maybe look at it a little bit. Whereas if you have a product that's a little bit more complicated, you may want to wait a couple of weeks if they need to install the product. So that way they've actually used the product in order to leave you a review.
Yeah, Jon, so much to dig into there. I want to call this out for listeners because we are obviously talking about Amazon here together right now, but what really makes you stand out in the Amazon space is that you are a marketer at heart. And I'm going to call out that you are only the second guest in our show's history to bring up the flywheel effect. The other guest who did that was Cole Riggs. I don't know the episode number off the top of my head, but you two are both brilliant marketers who understand the advertising side of the world as well as the organic side of the world. And I love it's because your brain thinks about that flywheel, and you know that if we can get this going, then it starts this going, and you see the way that all of these parts work together. I want to talk to you more about that data because, it's right there in your zone of genius. Listeners know we always ask guests for their zone of genius, and you say cutting through the data noise. I'm so glad that you brought up sales velocity. It's so revealing that that's a metric you pay a lot of attention to. Talk to us more about the data. What's some of the data noise that a lot of people pay attention to that you say, gosh, that's just noise. Don't worry about that. And then what are those metrics along with sales velocity that you say, hey, that's the leading indicator. That's the stuff that we're going to optimize for?
Yeah, great question. And I'm going to say something that's a little bit blasphemous in the Amazon world, and what makes Amazon unique. And that is, on Amazon, you really have two components that you're working with. You're working with your paid advertising. So we're very familiar with that. If you've ever advertised on Facebook or Google, where you have a return on ad spend. And it's pretty simple, where you say, hey, hopefully if I put $1 in, if I can get more than $1 out, then that's fantastic. Amazon actually works better because there's a combination of not only the paid side, but the paid side also influences the organic side. So the more paid sales that I have, or from advertising, increases also the number of organic sales I have, as long as I'm targeting the right keywords and I've got my marketing set up correctly. And so for that, when we're looking at the data, what happens is people get stuck in kind of that ROAS on Amazon, which is actually not as important a number as something that we like to call total average cost of sale, or TACOs, which is a lot more fun to say. And essentially what it does is, on Amazon, because of the way the platform works, that helps us take into account not only the dollars that we made from our advertising spend, but also looks at what influence does that have on our organic ranking, or the organic sales that we have. So we have a much clearer picture of how effective our advertising is in building our brand on Amazon.
Woof, Jon, I can see why you like the Amazon game so much. It feels exactly like that, a game. It feels like a puzzle that you're solving with so many different moving parts, and clearly you've been doing this for years. So it's something that not only it sounds, I'm calling this out in so many episodes this year, I'm going to call it out again. It sounds like it comes naturally to you, but it comes naturally because of how many reps you have, how many products you've launched, how many times you've done it, how many losses you have, as well as how many wins that you have. So sticking with with the baseball references, listeners need to know that you've struck out plenty of times, but you've also hit those singles, those home runs along the way. So I really want to call that out. There's so much that we could talk about. And Jon, I don't want to let you go just yet because I want to squeeze in one last question for you, because I know that your industry in particular is changing a lot thanks to AI. It's something that we're forced to talk about in so many industries this year, and even more so beyond this year. And I know that you incorporate AI in your approach. You have the conversion hero system. Talk to us about how AI is shaking up the Amazon world and how it's actually helping you and changing the way that you operate.
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad you brought that up. So the first thing to keep in mind is that for AI is great as, something that used to take an hour or 2 hours, now we can do in 10 to 15 minutes. So from a process efficiency standpoint, it's fantastic. So one example of how we're using this is we're using it to analyze reviews on competitor products and then also client products. So what that allows us to do in analyzing those reviews is look for those things where, a competition gap. So where our competitor maybe is weak, and our product has a benefit that's really strong. So for example, we looked at a brand where they sell, millions of dollars worth of greens every year on Amazon. And one of the things that we noticed was a couple of their competitors recently changed their formula, and people actually put in that review that there was a lot of, for lack of a better term, junk in the formula. So what we were able to do is then look at how we were better as a product and work that into the important areas where people were going to see them, like our title and some of our images and that type of stuff, to show that our product or the client that we're working with had a higher quality ingredients that was a lot cleaner and those types of things in order to boost their conversion rate. So that's how we're using AI. And then there's a bunch of other things that we use for our conversion hero system that allows us to basically boost conversion rates, which is one of the most important numbers when you look on Amazon, because that's how Amazon ranks keywords for your product, is by how well does it convert for that keyword, because Amazon always wants to show the best product for every keyword.
Yes, Jon, I'm going to call that out because I love that answer so much. In an AI-driven world, I love hearing your real-life application of it to use it strategically and intentionally. Listeners, you didn't hear Jon say that they are pumping out 50 garbage versions of product listings and descriptions. He is using it to make smarter strategic decisions by doing analysis and then taking that human perspective, that human experience, and applying it to the decisions that he makes. So Jon, I love that overview. I love how transparent you are with all of that. As we come towards the end, I know, me personally, you're giving me a million ideas, and I think that ideas are the root of action. So I always love giving guests the hard part, which is turning all of those ideas, all the different things that we talked about in today's episode, which there were plenty in today's episode for us to take in. We talked about product descriptions, finding the right product to sell. You talked about having that startup capital, logistics, analysis, all of these different things. Reviews is a big topic. With all of those things in mind, for listeners saying, gosh, that does sound like there's an Amazon opportunity here, what's the one action or thing that you think people should sit down from a strategy perspective and say, this is what I need to do when analyzing this. This is what I need to do to start entering the Amazon game while it's still there?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing is, always be testing. So if you are thinking, hey, I want to dip my toe into Amazon, the best time to do that was probably a couple of years ago, but the second best time to do that is today. So start that testing. Maybe your first product that you launch isn't going to be perfect. That's completely okay. It's what are learning from that system and testing different things. I speak with a lot of 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs who are selling and work on Amazon. And the biggest difference that I see between entrepreneurs that, struggle versus those that are growing, $10 million, $20 million businesses, is that they have a system where they're consistently testing. And some of those things might be really small tests like copywriting and images. And other things might be bigger tests where they're looking at new brands or business ideas to see what gains traction and how they can double down on those things that are working really well for them.
Yeah, Jon, that is such a good last piece of actionable advice for listeners. Listeners, you have your work cut out for you. There's so much to think about, but go back and listen to all the different parts of what Jon shared with us here today. Jon, I don't know how much other good stuff you've got in your arsenal, but I feel like you gave us a masterclass in Amazon here today. So I know that listeners will be keen to check out more about your work, your company. So where the heck should listeners go to find out more about everything that you're doing with First North Marketing?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things. The first thing is that if we do have any Amazon sellers out there, we offer a free hero conversion title using what I talked about as far as the AI analysis of looking at reviews, and then a bunch of other data points as well to give you a title in order to boost your conversion rate. So if you want to do that, you can find that at firstnorthmarketing.com/wantrepreneur. And then also, if people want to kind of see what I'm up to, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, where I post on a regular basis content about Amazon and e-commerce and really what's happening in the ecosystem right now.
Yes, listeners, you all know the drill. Jon has been so generous in that offer here on the show. He dropped those links, but also you can find those links down below in the show notes, wherever it is that you're tuning in. Shout out to all of our Spotify listeners. We see that platform growing every single day, but wherever it is that you're tuning in, look down in the show notes. Jon's business website is at firstnorthmarketing.com. And if you are selling on Amazon and you want Jon's eyes on your business, you heard the link right there, firstnorthmarketing.com/wantrepreneur. And also find him on LinkedIn. All those links are down below. Otherwise, Jon, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.